There's a movement brewing, and that movement is the Me Total lifestyle.
It centers around you keeping your sense of self intact and in gaining clarity of purpose as you age. I'm Carrie.
I'm Joe.
I'm JM.
And we're on a mission to show you how to enjoy friends, fellowship, and life without substance dependence.
It's time to discover how you can begin living a Me Total lifestyle.
Right here on the FUZZEE'ish podcast. Let's go.
All right, guys, we just wrapped up with Nico Lagan. He is a little bit of a lightning rod for conversation. Quick disclosure for audience members of the pod. Nico's views and opinions are his views and opinions. They don't necessarily reflect the members of this podcast. We're trying to bring safe conversations around substance abuse and alcohol abuse to this pod's audience, and people like Nico who have very opinionated thoughts around masculinity. They definitely suffer from some of the same things. So we wanted to give him a forum. But boys, what went on this podcast? What can our audience expect from Nico?
Got deep there for a minute. I was waiting for my dad to join to dive into this sort of really religious conversation that it went into for a minute. But all seriousness, I think what I heard through everything that Nico had to say is how important it is to have fellowship with other people and to have people that you can relate to, but also lean on in times of trials and tribulations. And additionally, the need as a dad to stand up for my kids and for my wife and for those around me. There's a lot to be said for that. Maybe I would say it a little bit differently or with a little bit different context, but certainly I think really aligns to a lot of what we talk about on a weekly basis on this show. So that was an interesting conversation and certainly a different angle on it than we've had. A lot more talk about Trump too. So what about you, KY?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, I think talking to Nico was just a testimony to the inclusivity that this show is all about. It doesn't matter where you come from, what you're into, who you vote for. We really want to open up this platform and just let people know that there is a space for you to talk about your Me Total journey. So I think if nothing else, if people are willing to come into this with an open mind, I think they'll take something from it.
Yeah, I think the other thing they'll add, we're all different too, right? Like we come at this differently. And I think you'll see that in all the shows and certainly maybe you see that even more on this one. So I think that's a cool part of why we get along so well and jive the way we do on this FUZZEE'ish podcast.
And kind of the sentiment that I really pulled out of it is that similar to us as podcast hosts, we don't need to be competing with one another to get our voice heard, as is relationship health, right? Like for the difference between men and women is allowed to exist, but we as husbands and wives or boyfriends and girlfriends or same-sex partners or whoever you are, we don't always have to compete with each other. I think the absence of teamwork in modern society is, to me, the underlying reason why we have both toxic masculinity and toxic femininity, is that people of all genders and races and creeds are struggling for power. And, I would just put it out there that we need more teamwork in society. And I hope that comes through in this episode, because I think we were able to stand firm and stand tall with somebody that we don't necessarily agree with on all topics. And we ended the podcast just fine. Nobody was shouting at each other and everybody's going to go about their way. And that's perfectly fine. Featured in Times Square, Nico Lagan is an entrepreneur, men's coach, and host of the controversial podcast, The Nico Lagan Show. Growing up, Nico didn't have a masculine figure in his life. Without the guidance, he associated with and idolized the wrong men. Before making the shift to who he is now, he lived a life as an addict and drug dealer. After spending more than a decade on the wrong path, working a 9-to-5 he didn't love, he realized how many others in the world are just like him and need someone to step in and fight for them. Masculinity is under attack in today's society, and Nico fearlessly champions strong men. Although others might see Nico's content as blunt and unapologetic and controversial, it brings back the fundamentals when men were allowed to be men. What was once a standard way of living is somehow now villainized. As a leader in today's society, Nico has been featured on many online publications, podcasts that have hundreds of millions of views, featured in Times Square in New York City, and it's just the beginning. He's a published author with works such as Purpose, how following your personal legend is the answer to your midlife crisis, which is aimed at men between the ages of 30 and 45 who already possess the 5 virtues of a good man: provider, protector, courageous, temperance, and faith. Now facing an existential crisis referred to many as the midlife crisis, these men are realizing that they are one day going to die. Until that day, Nico will be fighting for all men to reclaim their manliness until his very last breath. Whether that means getting canceled, banned, Nico's ready to do what's right. I've listened to a little bit of your show. I listened to you on Militant Grind. I know you were on that show a while back. So I'm really interested in your background. I know you grew up in kind of like a fatherless household, and you dealt with dealing drugs and doing drugs. And I know your mom kind of like pulled you back into better living and gave you a roof over your head and kind of gave you a reset button. But talk to us a little bit about those early days. I want to get into like your involvement and how you interacted with drugs and alcohol back in the day.
It's interesting because my dad did leave when I was 14 years old, but even prior to that, I can't remember him really being around. And I love philosophy, right? So I've been asking this question, like I've been asking myself for about a year now. What's worse, having a father that's not present or having a father that's completely absent?
That's a good question. I wouldn't know because my father is still a very active part of my life. So my guess is the more of your father you can have present, the better. But I don't know if there's a difference between not having them around at all or having them around but barely. So I can answer that.
I don't think anybody can, because most people don't experience both, right? There's not really a way, and I was too young to remember, but it's interesting that within a year of him leaving, even if he wasn't present, I was dropping out of school. I was doing drugs every day. I was turning into an alcoholic. I was associating with all the wrong person. Within a couple of years, I was selling drugs. My drug selling was to support my habit. It wasn't to make me rich. I wasn't that smart, right? So it's just interesting that as soon as there's a father figure that leaves, like I think it's Steve Harvey that says that when father leaves, they leave a hole in their shape in the soul of their son. So there's always a gap there. There's always something that needs to be filled. And by nature, men look for people to look up to. We're always looking for people to mold ourselves after. And once you understand that boys are born but men are made through trials and tribulation, it's always about what we bring to the table. It's always about what we've become. It's always about what we can give to others. We're meant to serve, we're meant to protect, we're meant to provide. And it's in our DNA. Like I didn't understand this when I was 14 years old, yet all the guys I look up to, all the idols back then. I was listening to Wu-Tang Clan, to Nas. I was listening to some Mobb Deep. I was listening to gangster rap, right? Like I come from a poor family, and I looked at those guys. I'm like, man, those guys have it way shittier than I do. And look at that. They have women, they have cars, they have money, they party all the time. I'm like, yep, that's a good man right there. But what the hell did I know? 14 years old. What the hell? I thought I'd be the first white rapper. And now I laugh at this, but that was before Eminem ever appeared. So technically I could have. But yeah, I don't have anywhere the skills that he's showing. Like we're not even playing the same sport at that point. But yeah, that lasted. I think, I left my mom. My father left. I was 14. I was a dropout of high school by 15. By 17, I was leaving my mom's house. And by then I was an alcoholic. I was drinking every day. I was doing drugs. I was selling drugs. I was a thief. I was just not a good person. Like deep down, like all around, I was not a good person. And this lasted for another 3 years. I was 20 when my mom gave me a call. It seems like, Joey, you already know the story. It's kind of strange that I don't have to explain it. I'm like, I guess I've been repeating this so many times that people
gives me a good starting
heard
point.
it. But yeah, what I find interesting about this, and I don't know if I talked about it on Militant Grind, but I don't have a very good relationship with my mother. Like to this day, we don't talk. Like I think the last time I spoke to my mother was probably Christmas last year.
Wow.
Like it's her birthday, so I called her, but she doesn't even call me for my birthday. It's like a little text, like happy birthday and pal. That's the relationship I have with her. And And it's strange because we always, like, we're extremely different. Like, she's very, very left. She's very victim mentality. Like, everything happens to her. She doesn't cause any of her problems. It's everybody around her that's the problem. And, you know, we've always had difficulty speaking because we're so different that, but somehow, somehow she gave me a call when I was at my worst, when I was getting kicked out of my apartment for like the third time in 4 years. I was contemplating, I had an opportunity to start producing drugs instead of selling it. So literally I could have continued down the rabbit hole, but I needed time. Like, I was getting evicted. I had no place to go. I'm literally, my boxes are on the floor next to me. And I'm like, what the hell, where the hell am I going? I'm becoming homeless that night.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow my mother calls me and she's being polite. She's not trying to make me feel bad about the situation. Like, she's not trying to tell me that what I'm doing is wrong. She's really just being nice. So I really believe to the core of my being that God somehow used my mother as a puppet and just like, I can imagine God, like, let's go, let's call him. And yeah, that's what happened. She just asked me if I was happy, which, it doesn't sound like a great question, right? When I ask you right now, are you happy? Yeah, whatever, I'm okay. But when you're in a place of hurt, when you're hitting rock bottom, you don't know what comes next, and somebody asks you if you're happy, it can be a challenging question, as simple as it is. And she then asked me, if you're not, she then told me, if you're not, well, come back. So I don't have money to pay for anything, but if you want a place to stay, I can give you a roof. You're going to need to work. You're going to need to go back to school. You're going to do something, because it's not true you're going to sit here and continue doing what you're doing right now. And that same night I moved back.
Wow. It's an incredible story. And now there's obviously been a couple decades since that passed, I believe. You've been yes, like hard at work, really trying to inspire people. Tell us a little bit more about how you fell into, wanting to give back to young men, and why young men specifically. Is there anybody that inspired this journey for you?
Not really. No, it's
was it just like an absence of that in your life that made you?
Oh, for sure. Oh, yeah, for sure. That's where it started. If it wasn't for the fact that my dad left when I was 14 years old, I wouldn't be speaking about I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now. I wouldn't be speaking about this every day. If it wasn't for the fact that I was raised by a single mother, I wouldn't be writing a book on giving the tools to single mothers on how to build the 5 virtues of a good man within young men, right? None of what I do today would be happening if it wasn't for that. It's from my dad leaving kind of sent me on a path of, I strongly believe that God will challenge you. I strongly believe that God will test you. I strongly believe that he will put you on a path because he knows that you can take it. Following your purpose, doing what God wants you to do is not easy. I don't want to be doing what I'm doing. Like, quite frankly, I don't want to. I had a very good job as a sales engineer. I was very good at it. I was working on an opportunity to work for Amazon. I would have made 400 grand a year. I did not need to do shit. I could have just stopped it there and just continue doing it for 20 years, buy a bunch more houses, and just retire at 60 with a bunch of equity, with a bunch of houses everywhere, and just, I'm out. No, instead I refinanced my house. Instead I cashed out all my investment. I quit my job and I started a company because that's what I was told to do. In order for me to produce the content I do every day, I need to be able to make a living. And at my old job, there's no way I could talk the way I could talk. I can talk right now. Like, I'm not employable anymore.
But there's a little bit of freedom in there, no? Like,
little bit?
It feels like
more than
a lot of it.
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's, I don't, as much as the last year has been hard, because it's challenging, man. Starting a business from the get-go. A year ago, I did not know. I had no idea what I was going to do. I just knew I needed a year. I knew I needed the time. I bought my time. That's all I did. When I quit my job on September 15th last year, I bought an RV. We bought a truck to pull the travel trailer. I mean, we packed all of our stuff a week after September 15th, when we didn't even know if we could cross the border.
Mm.
We didn't even know if they would let us in because of our vaccination status. Because on the news, they were telling us we couldn't come through. Because in Canada, we weren't allowed to. I wasn't able to move anywhere. I couldn't leave the country for a year and a half. I wasn't allowed.
Wow.
So we risked it, and the border agent couldn't give two crap about it. He's just, how are you going to support yourself? I'm like, bro, I'm good. Okay, bye. Bye, have fun. Enjoy the U.S. And so we didn't know. I really banked everything on it, but all I knew is I needed time to develop what I'm doing right now.
And when you speak about what you're doing right now, you mentioned something about 5 virtues that people need to possess, or young men need to possess. Can you give that to our audience right now so they can kind of get hip to this real quick?
Yeah. And it's interesting. Let me just say this, that they don't necessarily come from me. I was challenged. I'm a big Stoicism fan, so their virtues is something I'm very strong on. And I was in Austin, Texas at the gym, my girlfriend had like 10 grand of equipment recording me working out at the gym. And there's a young man that showed up. He's like, hey bro, what are you doing? Like, it doesn't look like a cell phone. There's a difference between somebody recording you with this and with the massive gimbal, the massive camcorder. So we started talking. Ends up that he's, I don't know if you know the guys from School of Hard Knocks. Like, they're everywhere. They're one of the biggest. They're freaking massive. Like, they started really the street interview talking about money. They interview people about.
Nice.
Turns out the main guy's right there. We started talking. We recorded a bunch of stuff together. We did a bunch of podcasts. And at one point, he's like, "Hey, bro, we need to do a YouTube video, and I want you to tell me what's the 5 thing every young man should know." I'm like, man, screw you. I don't know that right now. We were meeting a couple of days after, and that night I just woke up in the middle of the night. I wake up around 3:00 in the morning every day. So I just got up and I started writing. And before I knew it, I had the 5 virtues of a good man. So, but there's Stoic principle. If you follow Stoicism, I just rebranded them so that it makes sense in today's world. But the first one is courage. The second one is being a protector. Third is being a provider. Fourth is temperance. And 5th is faith.
Nowhere in there is my favorite, which is patience. How come patience didn't make the list?
Well, listen,
Patience, gotcha. A little bit synonymous.
Temperance is a virtue. Patience is a skill you acquire over time. Because I don't think patience is possible. I don't think somebody can really be patient. I think somebody can try to be. Somebody can build up to it and get better at it. But I don't think it's possible. And temperance to me takes envelop more than just patience. Patience is part of temperance.
Gotcha.
Plus, I think temperance has a nicer ring to it too.
Yeah,
Kind
for
of
sure.
does. Yeah.
It makes me sound more intelligent.
JM's a big Stoicism guy. I know he's out there reading Ryan Holiday books and stuff like that. JM, what are your thoughts on this?
The Daily Stoic it's crazy how often that one little verse on a daily basis hits on something that's so clearly part of what's going on in my life that day, and it boggles my mind. And I do it, I go through it every year, and it happens over and over. So I'm a big subscriber to that. I think one of the questions I have for you, as a guy who clearly markets himself as a masculine, has these 5 virtues.
What do you mean market myself? Are you trying to say I'm not?
No. Yeah, no. Okay. Whose story is so masculine, whose brand is so masculine, who clearly would kick my ass if we were in the same room and I said something that was not probably what you wanted to hear.
No, I wouldn't. I would never do that.
Okay.
He's very temperate. So
yeah, there you go. See, he would challenge it. Yeah, I wouldn't challenge it. I'm curious, your thoughts in the world today, as masculinity is being challenged by this idea of vulnerability, right? Mm-hmm. So in history and a lot of the philosophy even that you spoke of, but certainly as you look at what were powerful masculine men over the last hundreds of years, being vulnerable was not part of the story, right? Being stoic, sure. Being the provider, yes. Being the builder, yes. But today, and it even sounds like in some of the things you've mentioned today, vulnerability has become part of being masculine too. What would you say to that?
It's the way you look at vulnerability is when and where. So the best way I can explain it, 99.9% of the time, a man needs to be stoic in order to allow his wife to be feminine. But he needs to be vulnerable with her in exchange, because women want that connection. The problem that we see today is that men have no control. And that's why temperance is so important, because you either control your emotions or they control you. There's two states and that's it. Those are your choices. But when it comes to vulnerability, there's one safe space in the world that exists, and it's at home. So when I say a man should be a provider, it's more than just making money. It's providing a space, building, as you so said, building a space where your wife and your kids feel secure. Because you have two state of mind again. You're either surviving, which all you think about is where am I going to get my next meal? How am I going to pay for this? And a state of growth. If you never allow, if your family is always in a state of survival, they will never grow. So as a man, you're supposed to provide that kind of that safe space for them to grow. As soon as you step through that front door, you need to be responsible for your emotions. You need to have them under control. But there's a time and place for you to be vulnerable, and normally it's towards your kids and your wife. There's a fine line between being emotional and being stoic. You don't want to be a rock either, because you'll never be able to create bonds with anybody. But I'm vulnerable with some of my friends. Like, I got two bros that they know me in and out. I am vulnerable with those guys, but it's not in public. It's when the time is right, and it's up to us to figure that out.
So you mentioned being vulnerable at home with your kids and your wife, and then not obviously outside of the house. You have to show that strength and ultimately the temperance to not have your emotions controlling you. When does the bridge happen as somebody who has the gap? If you're looking at somebody I'm a dad of three. I've got, two sons that clearly are looking to me for that example. Where does the bridge happen from being that vulnerable person with them at home to try to teach them compassion and empathy and some ability to relate and be in control of their own emotions, to being this stronger masculine figure outside of the house? Where does that
It's not
happen?
your responsibility.
Yeah. Okay.
This, I think, is the mistake that we do today, because if you look at a man and a woman, if you look at a mother and a father, they complement each other. So study shows that in a household where the woman does not feel safe, she is not a good mother, because mothers are based in emotion. Emotional intelligence is supposed to be taught by the woman. You can look at some of the toughest men that ever lived. You look at not the Athenians, but the Spartans. The agoge, which is the rites of passages that they would go through, did not start until they were 7 or 8 years old. But until then, the boys would spend most of their times with their mother, because look at today. Like, I'm a prime example of that. I'm raised by a single mother. My dad, even when I was younger, my dad wasn't really present, so my mother did most of the job. What happens when you're trying to multitask? When you're trying to be both of them are going to get screwed up. To this day, I struggle with relationships. To this day, now it's very conscious, and it's been conscious for a very long time, and it's something that I need to work on. I'm not saying this as an excuse. I'm just saying those are the cards that were dealt. I'm dealing with them, but at the same time, my mother never taught me that. I look at my sister that's 1.5 years younger than me. She has the same problem as me, except she doesn't see it. But you look at the type of relationship that she's had her whole life. She doesn't want kids, and 2, she's never been affectionate. I have never seen my sister, and she's 40 now. I've never seen her affectionate with somebody. My mother, and like in my family, we don't even hug really. Yet I'm a big fan of free hugs. I've given maybe 5,000 hugs to complete strangers all across the US, all across Canada. So it's something I'm working towards, but it's supposed to come from the feminine energy. You're supposed to be more in the logical side. You're supposed to care for your children. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you're not supposed to be kind and compassionate with your children. But if you look at masculine and feminine energy, it's more of a feminine trait.
So real quick though, so we got masculine energy, we've got feminine energy. It seems to me, just kind of looking at it from a distance and kind of up close and personal. I'm married, I have 4 kids. I've got a wife of 12 years now. We've been together for almost 2 decades.
Congratulations. Sorry, but congratulations. Those are stories I love to hear. I love to hear that.
But so one thing that I'm noticing a little bit is there's a lot of competition between the energies and a lot of competition between the sexes. Why is that? It seems like everybody's angling towards masculinity, and they almost want, because I see a lot of women that appear masculine based on how how they're getting into society. They're kind of like wanting to compete with the men for certain types of positions and stuff like that. Is that really healthy for society, or should we have more specific roles that complement each other like it used to be back in the day? And how do we provide that? How do we get back to that without like setting people back? Because I know there's going to also be that narrative around, well, we just earned all these rights, I don't want to give them back now.
That's a brilliant question. It's a question I'm faced every day. And at the end, I'm blaming both men and women, because fathers are teaching that to their daughters as much as mothers are. But society is telling daughters that they don't need men. Our daughters are being told from a young age that you do not need a man to be happy. You do not need a man to take care of you. You do not need men to be around you. Yet, the society in which we live was built by men, is still maintained. Masculinity is the most powerful force on this planet. We have the potential to build and to destroy. It's always us that build everything, and that's going to destroy it. But we do it. Look at the society in which we live today. Nature is brutal. It's hard to live in nature. So as men, we decided that we're going to build a society so that our kids and our wives can be more secure, where we can provide to them. But we're not explaining that. We're not explaining this to our daughters anymore. And a guy I met this year, Justin Garcia, calls it the aquarium effect. So we live in a society for so long, we're so far detached from from when it was built and the maintenance of it, that we're like those little fishies in a tank, and we're just like, we don't realize that there's somebody behind the scene that's keeping the water clean, that's making sure the pH level is good, that's feeding us, that's taking care of all of our little needs. And we're so arrogant that we don't even realize that there's people behind the scene. Like right now, people don't even understand that 95% of the 20 most dangerous jobs are done by men. Is it because women can't do it? No, it's because they don't want to. No, but there's no woman out there that's, hey, I want to be able to work on the oil fields. Of course not. Nobody wants to do those jobs. Men do it because we can. We're stupid enough to do it, and it pays. It's a risk. So we just need to go back to a point where we explain to our daughters that, does she need a man? No, because I don't think men and women need each other to exist. I can live without a woman for the rest of my life and it's going to be fine. But we do complement each other. We're supposed to go. We're two sides of the same coin, but yin and yang, same thing. We're supposed to polarize each other.
I think it's pretty prevalent in society, and it comes from men too. When I see what's happening in pop culture around sports right now, right? There's no such thing as team anymore. So back in my day when I was a kid, we had favorite players, but we also like really revered the idea of teamwork and coaches that were, the legendary coaches like John Wooden. And in my backyard, it was Joe Gibbs of the Washington Redskins, or, there's several various different, like John Thompson of the Georgetown Hoyas or whatever. Nowadays, I don't have a favorite team. I like LeBron James. I don't have a favorite team. I like Tyreek Hill. I don't have a favorite team. I like XYZ. Is there an overarching absence of leadership in general? Because when I see the competition between the sexes, it's like, I just want the power. I don't care about all the trimmings that go along with the household and all this other kind of stuff. Like, or do you feel like we as a society are lacking leadership overall?
I love the word leadership. I absolutely love, because men are supposed to lead. Men are born leaders. But we have this misconception of what leadership is. We think CEO of a company that's running thousands of people. We don't understand that leadership is as small as leading your family. It's as small as being somebody that's dependable in your community. Leading by example. One thing, what I've learned over the past years of going from just a few thousand followers to more than 100,000, people look at what I'm doing, but they don't talk. They don't comment, because they don't want people to know that they agree with what I'm saying. But you know how many times have I got messages in the back end to just say, hey, bro, what you're doing is amazing. So just me doing what I'm doing, having the balls to say, you know what, screw this noise. I'm going to say something because I'm supposed to say it. Just leading by example, you enable others to do the same.
Well, now, really important. Another thing was ship at the end of it, right? So leadership vacuum, we acknowledge that.
Mm-hmm.
But are we getting, and this is where I want to tie it back to alcohol a little bit, because I feel like a good leader of a household doesn't resort to the bottle when they're stressed out. But is there also a void of fellowship amongst men, like a safe space that men can go to talk without alcohol being involved, that, you know, they can feel some sort of camaraderie or something like that? Should we try to amp that up as a society? You know, this sober living, yes, but with other men in fellowship with you.
$1,000,000. I don't think I could shake my head more than I was doing it. I was trying not to hit my microphone.
Well, that's the number one thing that all of us boys on this 100%. Call, we don't drink. We love each other. Anytime we get a chance to be getting on this podcast once a week or 3 times a week with these guys is my fellowship, you know.
Love it. But you're 100%. You know how when I became manly, when I discovered martial art. When in my early 20s, I had been hitting the gym. I'm like, man, my body's important. And I was a victim my whole teenage years. I was a victim. I couldn't fight. I knew it. I was bullied when I was younger. And it's when I stepped into a gym and I started to train with killers. I started to understand that those guys are so nice. You know how much conversations we've had on the mat, bloody, sweaty, scraped, just completely exhausted, just sitting, barely able to sit. And you just start talking. How many times have we gone out to watch fights? It's not about drinking. It's just about a bunch of boys that likes fighting, that are sitting in the same place, just being together. But today we've removed, even the Boy Scouts is not even exclusive to men anymore. How ridiculous is that? That we have no institution right now that is 100% men. There's none. You become a Mason. Maybe you could become a Mason.
Maybe a Mason.
And it depends. Are you a traditional one, or are you the new type of Mason that allows women? So even Masonry is not 100% women. It's not 100% men anymore.
Then you got to get into all that devil worshipping, which I can't espouse.
But you know, at the end of the day, this is the problem. It's just we're so far down the rabbit hole that we don't even understand the simple things that men need to be surrounded by other men, so that they can learn what it is to become a good man. Rites of passages have been there for probably 60,000 years. Look at every single culture out there. There are rites of passages where more mature men take younger boys and teach them what it is to become a man. There's 3 different types of rites of passages that men should have. We have zero. We have none in our society. Even like I said, the Boy Scouts are gone. And how awesome are the Boy Scouts when you just think about what it is? A bunch of older men that takes younger boys in the woods to show them survival skills, to chill around a fire and have them do just, how amazing is that?
I'll never forget one of the things that got me hooked into Game of Thrones back in the day, season 1, episode 1, when the main kind of archetypal figure, the father of the house of the wolf, or I don't even remember the name of them, anyway, the Stark family, he made sure that when they caught the thief, that he brought his boys out to the block to show them cutting his head off, because they were like, no, it's our land, it's our job, you have to watch this because it's going to be your job one day, essentially. And there's no more of that. Like, there's, at least in modern day society, it doesn't seem like there's as many wives out there expecting their husbands to go out and be masculine in that way with the next of kin, which, you know, maybe is missing in society a little bit. Like, not learning how to be a man from another man is, maybe we're a little bereft of that.
33 to 40%, depending on the studies you look at, are the amount of boys that are raised without their father in the household. So when I was young, 26, when it happened to me 27 years ago, I was an exception. Now it's the norm. Like, we're talking 33 to 40. That's insane. That's absolutely insane. But
what I'm saying is, even so, that's statistically proven, right? But even the men that do grow up as present fathers in their household are
100%.
not being expected to be as manly as our fathers and our grandfathers' generations of men, right?
This is
women
this
aren't
is why-
women aren't being expected to be as feminine as their mothers and grandmothers were either. We're all kind of, it's almost like men and women are becoming more homogenous as just like
that's the goal.
genderless parent types.
That's the goal. That's the goal, is to meet somewhere in the middle, because we're all the same. Yet, if you look at the definition of the same, that means the same means identical, and we're not. Men and women couldn't be any different. So we're not the same. We are not the same at all. It's obviously not working. It is obviously not working. Look at the relationships of today, to a point where now you have guys like the passport bros. You've heard of those guys, right?
The ones that go overseas to find their wife. Yeah.
And what I find funny about those guys is that, one, I understand the sentiment. I feel bad for young men today, because it's extremely dangerous for a man to get married today. Like, you need to be extremely careful who you choose, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it is the reality. But you have the passport bros are like, hey, I'm gonna go to the Philippines, or I'm gonna go to the Eastern European bloc to get me a woman. Bro, you're not a man.
Right.
Do you think my girlfriend would accept? My girlfriend is firstborn immigrant Italian. Her parents have been together for 45 years. Her father is a man. Her mother is a woman. There's no denying it. They don't play each other's roles. They know what they're supposed to be doing. Do you honestly think that if I wasn't manly, my girlfriend would be here? Any woman in the past 20 years that I've dated, and I've dated anything from doctors to professors, from women that are extremely educated, that normally will be more masculine, every single one of them love the fact that I'm 210 pounds of muscle and I can kill somebody with my hands. Every single one of them. Because they want to feel protected. They're not going to admit to it, but being able to walk around at 3 o'clock in the morning knowing that I'll take a bullet for them, knowing that I'll do what needs to get done to defend them without questioning it, is something that they want.
I just marked that clip for social media distribution. So killing people with your bare hands might be the thing we talk about. But real
also,
quick,
too, Joe, let me just ask. I wanted to ask you this earlier, Nico. I think it's a good segue. I think we live in a society today, specifically for men. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of pressure. You look at the suicides. You look at the mass shootings. It's generally males. And I'm just curious, like, what shifted for you, man? Like, there's still a lot of guys out there who would literally ruin their entire lives because someone flicked them off. You know what I mean? So like, what was that shift for you that kind of got you to a point where like you could kind of take a breath and say, you know what, it's not worth it? And I know you mentioned martial arts. I know martial arts have really made an impact in my life. I'm just curious, what was that for you, man?
12 years ago, I discovered Buddhism. That's what did it. I become Christian over the years, especially over the past year, but I've been spiritual for a very long time. Like, it started a really long time ago, but it started with Buddhism. And my mother eventually remarried, and the guy that became my stepfather, one of the greatest men I've ever met. And he got cancer. It didn't make any sense to me. Like, ex-military, super healthy, got esophagus cancer, battled cancer for 5 years, like radiation and chemotherapy basically every month for 5 years. Yeah. And he
sorry, man.
Oh, it is what it is. He was a great man. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, though, when he died, I couldn't explain it because it didn't make sense to me. Like, how can a guy like that die? And one of my buddies gave me a Buddhist book, and I started reading, and it's just the middle way. They talk about this in Buddhism all the time, to try to find the middle way, try to understand that you don't control much. All you control really is your emotions, your actions, and your reactions. Everything else is out of your control. Whatever people force on you is not up to you. You do not choose most of the situations in which you're going to find yourself, but you do have 100% control on how you're going to react to them. And you know, people believe that reaction is, for most people, at least I should say this, reactions are something that's unconscious. You simply react to a situation. Yet through meditation, through self-hypnosis, I have built a pathway between my conscious mind and my unconscious mind by repeating the same thing over and over again, similar to what marketing does on commercials on TV. Just keep on repeating the same thing to yourself through meditation and self-hypnosis, and you'll see that you start anchoring some things in your mind. And this is how it started. It's really just in Buddhism when I started meditating about 12 years ago. It really, really, like, to this day, I meditate after every workout because I do not want to re-enter the world pumped with testosterone, hyper, because I know with the lack of patience that I have as a human being, like, this is one of the reasons I don't drink. I'll have a drink with a cigar when I really feel like it, but getting drunk, I think my girlfriend's known me for 4 years. She's never seen me tipsy. And I drink maybe once a month, like one super nice day. I love cigars, so nice day, smoke a cigar with a drink, but I'm not a good drunk. I'm terrible drunk. It has ruined my life for almost 20 years because I'm such a bad drunk. I have a really big anger problem. So
that's a good segue into the final segment that we typically like to do on this show is called Products and Practices. So knowing that you only like to drink when you have a cigar in your mouth, what do you do to quell temptation the rest of the time? Like, is it just you can call upon it and summon it based on meditations and avoid the bottle because you just know what the ramifications of that are? Or are there certain products and practices that you utilize to stay as clear-headed and level-headed as possible?
I've made peace with the fact years ago that anytime you change your state of consciousness, could be anything from caffeine to getting a high, should be for a reason. It should be a conscious choice. Why am I taking a substance that is altering my state of mind? It needs to be mindful. You need to have an answer for every time. As you said earlier, I have drank alcohol for so long because I was coping with something I did not want to deal with. Same thing for drugs. Now I will allow myself to have a drink every now and then just because it's like a reward. It matches with the cigar, but it is always 100% conscious. I treat my food the same way. I cheat, like tonight's a cheat night. I haven't ate right now since about 7 o'clock last night. Big fan of intermittent fasting, so I've been fasting for about 20 hours. My girlfriend's at the store picking up some pepperoni so we can put on the pizza, and I'm going to have nachos, chocolate cake, and pizza. That's what I'm having. As soon as we're done, bro, I'm going to gain 10 pounds.
I'm on 25 and a half hours right now fasting. I've
good
skipped
on
the
you.
last 3 meals. So
it's amazing for your mind, right? But
it is.
Every time I put something in my body, I do it consciously, no matter what it is.
So that reminds me of a question that I ask people often when people are struggling with, like, existential questions of like, why are these things happening? Why do bad people die? Why do good people die? All that kind of stuff. You got to ask yourself, did God put you here so you can be happy? And if you sit there and think about that long enough, you start to realize probably not. and then that starts to explain why some things happen in your life. It's really, we're here for a reason, and that's to learn things. We're here to try to live and ladder up to the glory of God and the grace of God. And that's hard to do if you don't learn lessons about things in life. And lessons are hard, so. But I really appreciate you coming on the pod, and I love the answers that you've provided here. Any parting gifts for the crew? Anything you got working on right now that you want to tune our audience into? Anything going on in your social media handles that you want to let them know about?
Before I do, I just want to carry on to what you said there. Pain and suffering are the greatest of teachers. We do not allow ourselves to feel anymore. We don't allow ourselves to hurt. If you're hurting, meditate on it. Let it be. It has something to teach you. Pain and suffering are the greatest of teachers. Nobody changes because they're comfortable. You only change when you hit rock bottom, and doing the same thing over and over again is no longer an option. This is where you change. And the reason I love Christianity so much is, as you read the Bible, you will understand that pain and suffering are needed. How are men built? Through trials and suffering. So instead of seeing it as a punishment, see it as a place of growth. There's a story I heard years ago where this man asked God for patience. God answers him to say, I cannot give you patience, but I can put you in a situation that will force you to become patient. So just a little 2 cent, one other of my many rants on the subject.
I love it. And back to fasting, like God sometimes, from what I've heard throughout the Bible, it's you unlock deeper levels of connection with God when you're fasted. So, what are you doing when you're fasting? You're withholding, you're making your life more painful so that you can have a different level of consciousness or clarity when you talk to the Father. So,
and let's not even say how good it is for your body, how much of a break you're giving to your body, how healthy it is to be able to fast. Like I do fast there 3 to 5 days sometimes. So that's a challenge. That's a different story, but yeah.
Nico, where can our audience find you? Obviously the Nico Lagan show, I should say, but where on social media can they find you?
Everywhere. I post on probably 8 different platforms daily. So at Real Nico Lagan everywhere. If you don't know, just nicolagan.com. All my socials are there.
Gotcha.
And
well,
it's
been a
just
real
look for
treat,
a
bro.
bald-headed French guy. You'll find me somewhere.
It's been real, Nico. Appreciate your realness, man.
Yeah, for sure.
That's all
Thanks
I
so
got,
much for
man.
coming on.